welcome to another edition of Health Elevation Corner with me, your girl, Jenny Russell. How you doing? I hope, like me, you to remember that you are blessed and highly favored, a magnet for miracles, the solution to someone's problem, and the answer to someone's prayer. How you doing? How's your week been? We're into week 5, Health Elevation, and we're going to look at movement that matters. Movement is what we're doing this week. So let me ask you a question. How's your posture? How would you describe your posture? Would you say it was good? Or would you say it needs improvement? Or would you say it's poor? And the reason why I ask you that is because if we're going to look at movement that matters, we need to understand what that encompasses. And the first thing we need to understand is that posture is a position from where all movement begins and ends. So posture, our posture, is the position from where all movement begins and ends. Good posture, better movement ability, better performance, less likelihood and less potential for injury. Poorer posture, poorer movement ability, poorer performance, increased potential and likelihood for injury. So posture is a position from where all movement begins and ends. So before you get out there, because spring is coming, want to get start doing your running and jumping around and doing what you're doing, remember, if posture is a position from where all movement begins and ends, then based on your posture, your movement ability, your performance and your potential for injury is based around where you find yourself standing today. So that's number 1. Number 2, we need to understand that flexibility is the first thing we should look at if we want to improve our posture. If we have tighter, shorter muscles that can't work for their full range of movement, then we're going to have less range of movement, we're going to have less flexibility. Now that can happen in the arm, that can also happen in the hamstring when the butt tucks under, that can happen here in the hip flexors when the pelvis is tilted too far back or tucked too far forward, tight, too far back, tight, tight. That's going to cause a problem. That's the next thing we need to know. So before we go into strength and power, I can do 100 sit-ups, look at my body, I look good. We need to think flexibility first. After we have the flexibility, we need the stability. Now, standing on a stable surface, we should be pretty stable. But what if that surface moves from underneath us? What if we have a surface such as this that moves from underneath us? How stable are we then? What reflexes do we need to have, and do we know the difference between righting reflexes that keep us upright on a stable surface and tilting reflexes that send the messages from the body to say, remain upright? That's what we need to look at. So flexibility first, stability second, then your strength, then your power. Too many people are running into the gym and they're going for power and strength when they don't have, 1, the flexibility, which means they cannot have the range of movement because they're not open enough. Hello. And 2, they don't have the stability, which means the potential to protect the spine, much less the joints, is going to be diminished. So flexibility, stability, strength, and then power. And then the third thing we need to understand, so posture, the position from where all movement begins and ends. Flexible enough to get into position, stable enough to maintain and protect the joints, then the strength, then the power. Then thirdly, we need to think about how our body keeps its equilibrium. So our feet are our base of support. Our pelvis is our center of gravity over our base of support. And our head and shoulders are our limits of stability. Our vestibular system, our eyes, our inner ear, the jaw, always want to remain level on the horizon. So wherever we find our body twisted, our eyes and inner ear will shift accordingly. So if this hip goes up and this shoulder comes to try and rebalance, to balance me, my head may shift slightly to the side just to try and get that, because I'm kind of off. So I'm just trying to work out what's going on. That's what the body's going to do. So we need to try and make sure we understand where we are. So if we are stacked well, then that's fine. But if our pelvis is too far back, then what's going to happen is as the pelvis goes back, the chin may go up slightly and the eyes go down, just to try and balance. If the pelvis is too far forward, The chin may come down and the eyes go up, just to balance, so that head position changes. But we come back down to the feet first, since this is where we start from. We're pushing off. This is where we move from. And what we need to think about is the arches here are our natural cushion. Do we have arches? Really simple way to test. If you've got a flat foot here and you've got no arch, all you need to do is sit on a chair, and the minute you sit down and you take your feet off the floor, if the arch appears, then you have what we call a functional flat foot. If the arch does not appear, then you have what we call a structural flat foot. So that's a point of reference for you. Functional flat feet means it's just the way in which we're loading, which is making the feet collapse in. Structural means we were born with it, so therefore you are a candidate for orthotics. Functional means you need to look at what's going on in the chain and how it goes up. So if you roll out on the feet and what we call supinate, a lot of people do this, that's much more of an opening up position, but that puts a lot more stress through the outer side of the legs. If you roll in on the other hand and knock the knees together and lose the arch, that's like what we call a protective position. So I can assess a lot about a client and their mental, emotional, not just their physical history, from the way in which their position of their knees are. That tells me a lot. So we look at those things here. So I would investigate a bit more mentally and emotionally if somebody's more closed in, protecting themselves, than if they're more open up. It gives me some indicators of what I need to start to look for. So this is the only time I don't make no apologies for my broad feet. But we want to try and spread those feet so we can get good grounding. What we want to have on the floor is the 4 points. Under the big toe, we want to have weight under the baby toe, so the balls of the feet here and here. The inner and outer side of the heels is where we want to be. So come up onto the toes, spread your feet. Spread that weight, spread the toes. Roll back down, get weight on the inner and outer side. What you'll find is the middle of the knee will track over the center of the toes. So you want to spread your toes there. The interesting thing is here, can we use our toes? Can we make the big toes lift? Because that tells us a lot about what's going on up the chain and what happens all the way up the chain. Can we leave the big toe down? Can we lift the 4 toes? Can we spread them? Our toes have roles to play and they should be able to work. And when we start to lift these toes and move, we start to feel things happening inside the calves, inside the knees, right up into the groin. When we're lifting here, we feel things running along the outside, all the way up and into the butt. Everything is connected. It's just whether or not we're using it. We put shoes on all the time, we close down those sensations, and so therefore the messages from here to here can be lost, but they get lost around here. And that causes us a major problem because that's where we start off and we push off and we do our gait. So we want to be able to have the middle of the knee in line with the second toe and have a good position and base for foundation. We don't want the pelvis too tucked under. We don't want the pelvis tipped too far back. We want to try and improve our posture. But that's as far as I'm going to go with posture today. But that becomes a much more deeper subject. You'll see it's going to become really long. The next thing we now have to look at now is our primal patterns. Squat, push, pull, twist, run, jump. Squat, push, pull, twist, run, jump, lunge. It's a form of a squat. But everything for me comes from the squat. So if we want to look at movement that matters, we have to look at posture, we have to look at flexibility and stability before strength and power. We need to look at foot position of the pelvis over the feet, because what happens here affects what happens down here. What happens down here affects what happens here, and what happens here is affected by either or. So all 3 can affect the chain, but all 3 need to work together. The messages come from here, they run down the spinal column, they transmit through here and down into the feet. So what are we telling our feet? What are we telling our pelvis? And how are we telling ourselves to stand? That's what we need to have. But for all movements, literally every movement comes out of a squat. You squat to get into your car. Whether your car is a high car or a low car, you squat to sit down onto a chair. You squat to sit on your sofa. You squat to sit on the throne, the toilet. You're always squatting. But it's interesting that the minute a position or an obstacle is moved from behind you, everyone's like, they don't know how to bend. And the main issue is that we do not know how to synchronize the flexing of the hip with the flexing of the knee. So we need to move from here and here. I always describe it like folding paper. If you think of folding paper, dropping from the hip, not dropping from the knees and locking the hip like you can't move here. Drop from the hip, sit back into the squat. That's what you do when someone offers you a chair. They say, here, Miss Russell, have a seat. I move from the hip and I sit down. I move from the hip and I stand up. So the function of the butt is to extend, one of its functions, primary functions, is to extend the hip. So the butt has a role. Like I said, broad feet, I make no apologies for, spread the feet. The butt isn't there just for you to sit on and spread like butter. Sit into it, sit out of it. But if, because of postural limitations, you have an inflexible spine, tight hamstrings, and most of us are really tight inside the groin, then you are going to find something as simple as a squat really hard to do. So you need some mobilizers first. You need to think about some stretches you can do that can loosen up those areas that will allow you to have a bit more flexibility so that you can get down into a squat. If you've got tight hamstrings and you only stretch the hamstrings, it will pull on the calf. You need to stretch the calves and the hamstrings. So there are a couple of stretches I'm going to show you now. Simple mobilizers that will allow you to have the flexibility or increased flexibility to get into a movement like a squat so that you don't end up pulling your back. If you've got to move furniture or pull boxes, you want to know that you can use the bum and you can draw and pull. It's much better that way than to actually lean over, pull and stress out the shoulders, the upper back or even the lower back. So you want to try and protect yourself at all costs. So if I want to get more flexibility in my spine, a really simple exercise to do to increase that flexibility is the Mackenzie press. So I bring myself down, turn my toes in, turn my heels out, place my forearms on the floor, deep breath in. As I breathe out, I push through the palms, lift my body up, relax my shoulders. So I'm going to do this 6 to 8 times. Not right this second, but you could do this 6 to 8 times, right? You do this 6 to 8 times. Try and hold for 5 seconds at the top. So you breathe out on the way up. Breathe out. That's my clock in the background. Breathe in down. So I do that. So that's the first one. That's going to help give me more flexibility through my low back. The second one I may do is just to loosen out my inner thighs. So I want to just get some weight shifting from side to side. I've got my 4 points, 2, 4 on my feet. My trunk is tall. I try and drop the hip down because I want to stretch the inner thigh. So I sit into it, give it a nice little stretch. I can reach. It's still a form of a squat though. Look at this. Push, 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 and loosen out. Or I can lunge out. But I can just loosen out. I can lift and roll. So whichever way I go, I'm loosening out. Then, to stretch my groin, I put my foot on the side of the sofa, bend this knee, sink into it, get a stretch. Keep the foot flat, not allow the foot to roll in. Get a good stretch on the inner thigh. Turn that knee. 4 points still here. Stretch. You can do it if you need to hold on to the wall. Then fine, but sit into it, get that stretch. So you want to do 15 seconds each side. I also like to do it with a lot of work on the wall. Really simply, and it's even nicer here because I can roll forwards and get a real good deep stretch right in the inner thigh. So 15 seconds each side. Now can I say, because the groin is usually very tight on us, we stretch it twice, always. Right, left, right, left. But, if you find your left side is much tighter than your right, then you'll go left, right, left, right, left. Anywhere you find a tight spot, you always do that more. So you do more stretching on that side. Otherwise, you just exacerbate keeping the short, tight side short and tight, and the longer, weaker side long and weak. So always make sure you stretch the tighter side at least one time more than you do the other side. That's just a tip for you. So the hamstrings now, the next one. An active hamstring movement is just to swing through and get the hamstrings a bit looser. There are lots of other movements you can do, but that's a real simple one. Again, you can just put the hand on the wall, swing through. So you're gonna feel that pulling in the hamstring. That's gonna loosen it out. You can then stretch it in the same way you did your groin by putting the foot on the edge of a sofa, toes to the ceiling, lift the chest up, lean forward from the hip, don't round the shoulders and come forward. Lift the chest, sit back, get the stretch. Now I get that through my calf and into my hamstring. If I bring my arm round, I get it slightly deeper, right down from the ankle all the way up, so I get a good stretch. The other one I like to do is to place the fingers on each of the toes, bring the tummy onto the thighs, fingers here, I breathe in, it's a Qigong move, I breathe in, into the balls of the feet as I rock forwards, I breathe out as I sit back into the heels, allow the balls to lift slightly, I'm here, and my hands, I just imagine, that someone's got their hands here, and they're just going to tip my bottom up, so I do not come disconnected here. Breathe in, sit down, breathe out, lift up. So I'm going to stretch through the hamstrings and into the low back. Breathe in, breathe out. I can circle. So this move here is a really good long stretch for the hamstrings. So what happens now is that by doing that move there, doing the other two, I've loosened out my hamstrings, my inner thighs, my low back. That's going to allow me now to get a better stretch, in a better position in the squat. So I get my 4 points, even my feet up. Get my 4 points, roll down. The middle of the knee is running through the second toe. I'm going to imagine unfolding paper from the middle. So all I'm going to do is sink and drop and lift and come up. Now sometimes I like to do it with a ball in my hand. These are really nice to buy. 1 kilo, £9, 84 I think it is. 2 kilos, like 12 quid. I like to use the floor sometimes because I like to use the the floorboards as my marker. So feet apart, just outside hip width. I have the ball just in front of my face, so I breathe in. I draw my belly button gently towards my spine. I drop my hips. I'm folding from the hips. I move from the hip first, not from the knees, from the hip. As my hip sits back, my eyes on the horizon, down I go. I lift the arms. It's like I'm stuck and someone's going to say, Jenny, come on, I'm going to pull you up. Up I come. So I'll show you again from the side. Here, not over my head, so I'm arching my back, just in front of the forehead. Sit the hip back. Breathe out as you sit down. Lift the arm up. Breathe in as you come up. So that's just a standard squat. And remember, I've got that flexibility so I can get all the way down. That's how children are. They sit down, they're talking all day, blah, blah, blah. I'm not rounding my shoulders, I'm down. Now here I can turn my feet out slightly, turn them forward, take them slightly wider. But I'm coming up from here. The butt extends my hip. So if I sit into it, I stand out of it, the butt extends my hip. Heart and lungs are working with the breathing squat, breathing out, down, breathing in, up. So I have those movements there. So I'm going to leave it there for now because it's like, woo, Jenny, you've given me so much information. But there's no point saying, look at me, I look good, if you don't function well inside. So to recap, posture is a position from where all movement begins and ends. Better posture, better movement ability, better performance, increased potential to offset injury. Poorer posture, poorer performance, poorer movement ability, increased potential to bring about injury. Flexibility allows us to get into positions, especially a squat, without having to lift the heels or compromise any of the joints and stress the joints. The squat should be felt here, 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 not here, not here. Flexibility, stability, so we are strong and stable, so we're able to be on any surface. Change our base of support, very simply by changing where we are, and then suddenly our center of gravity has to be over the base of support. So flexibility, stability, strength and power. And then once we understand that, we look at primal patterns: squat, push, pull, twist, lunge, run, jump. We're going to go through those over the next couple of weeks, and we'll just build onto that. But just take that into consideration and think about those 3 movements I gave you. Use those and see how your ability to get down into a squat improves. Keep the eyes on the horizon. Don't tip the head up. Sit back through the hip. Push up through the hip. And life will be really good for you. So until next week, in health and happiness, it's Jenny saying, stay blessed.